The Swole Patrol podcast. We talk about getting super buff and eating lots of animal protein and having big giant boners that are swole. Today's guest is Layne Norton. He is a PhD in nutritional science and he's stronger than you. Trust me, I don't care who the fuck you are. He's stronger than you and he's veiny and super buff.
Wow.
Yeah.
While you're reading about Cardi B.
I was reading
You were reading about Cardi B singing that damn song.
Pretty impressive, right?
That was impressive. Yeah. Susan, you see that?
Dual task.
I think about that. When I ask her, what time should I pick her up? If she's drinking coffee, that's too much. Too big.
Female.
Too big a dual task.
Female.
Hey,
they don't do that.
Everybody.
Thick women can't do that. So, Dr. Drew.
Yes, sir.
Every once in a while, we have people on that are they're unquestionable. There's all these people in the nutritional world, in the fitness world, that are nothing but book science. Okay?
Or folk science. One or the other.
Either they're woo woo or they never left a lab and they have man tits.
Yes. So either you're right. Either it's pure science, pure bench science, or pure folk psychology. Really
folk psychology. Or they're all anecdotal. Yeah, they're giant and they're buff, but they don't have anyone or any type of scientific background to support their claims. They just it's n equals 1.
Mm-hmm.
Today's guest is a man who is a PhD in nutritional science, and he is also a very, very high-level power lifter and bodybuilder, as well as a physique and bodybuilding coach to many, many, many successful men and women. He is a man that loves to go online and shit on people. And I get a lot of entertainment out of him getting in real long, drawn-out Twitter fights. And I'm talking about our guest tonight, Layne Norton. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you, guys. I think that was a very astute observation of my career, getting in Twitter fights. Thank you.
Not to wax poetic too much about your background, because it is impressive. But you're like I said, is it the PhD is in nutritional science?
That's correct. Yeah.
And from the University of Illinois. And were you already someone who knew that was going to be your career when you got involved in it, or did the study of nutrition get you to become super jacked guy?
No, it's definitely the other way around. So basically, I was always interested in science. I actually wanted to be marine science when I was young. I wanted to study sharks. But latter half of my high school life, I was really bullied pretty badly when I was younger and got no attention from girls. So I picked up lifting to hopefully stop getting bullied and get more attention from girls. It didn't work for either one of those, but it did help me develop self-confidence. And by the time I was about a year into my undergraduate, I was doing biology, and I ended up switching over to biochemistry because I wanted to learn human metabolism better. I had started competing in some teen bodybuilding shows, and then shifted towards the open, which is the basically the tough category essentially. And I would read these muscle magazines, and back in 2001, 2002, that time frame, you didn't really have the plethora of information you have today.
Right.
I always tell people it's better today in some aspects and worse today because you've got all the information you want. Now your problem is trying to sift through it.
Back when I was a kid, it was Joe Weider magazines were the only magazines that were out there.
Back in your day, it was fucking smokestacks.
No, Joe Weider had magazines then. Yeah,
and
yes,
but also, to kind of add to that, you were really on the tail end of what I thought to be the neo golden era of bodybuilding. That the mid '90s. Into 2000, 2001, it was just kind of fantastic, with Yates passing the baton to Ronnie Coleman and a lot, Lee Priest, and it was a cool time to be into those muscle mags, in my opinion.
That's because you were in high school.
Yeah, and that's back when people actually cared about bodybuilding, and right. It was actually even on TV, it was on ESPN.
Right.
So I actually basically got into competing, and then from there, knew that I wanted to make a career out of that. I had no idea how I was going to do that because, I was in natural bodybuilding. I've never taken anything personally. I have no problem with people who do. I view that as a personal choice. But I knew that it wasn't for me. And so it was kind of like, well, how am I going to make a living in this industry? Because it seems like all the top guys are doing that. So what am I going to do that's going to be different? So, doing the PhD, about 3 years into my undergrad, I decided I felt like I didn't know anything. So I wanted to go on and do more stuff. And Dr. Layman at the University of Illinois was doing a lot of really cool protein research. And
by the way, I got to stop you. I know I'm talking to a scientist at the moment they say, I don't know, I didn't know anything. I knew then I didn't know anything. That's when you go, okay, dude, that's real training. Right. Because if everybody that has all the answers and narratives and immediately just go, well, you know what you're talking about. Because we none of us in science really know anything. We know what we know, and we can say certain things about certain things, and then it's like, it's speculation.
And far too many.
I always tell people, if you want to be able to like put on your bullshit detector and sift through expert versus charlatan. Yeah. An expert is always going to say things like, well, we think this is important, but only when there's this. And we're not really sure about that. And, it might be important and we're not quite sure. And when I give seminars, I always tell people, I'm like, you're going to hear me say the 3 magic words today. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you're going to hear me say that more than you'll hear me give a conclusive answer because it's just so contextual dependent. If you've got a real expert, they're always trying to provide a lot of context with any recommendation they give.
Yeah. And the other thing is that BSers tend to build explicit narratives. A goes to B, B goes to C, and then D. And it's always D. It's like, no. It's all a giant probability equation. And we think A kind of goes towards B. Yeah. So that's it.
Yeah, and doing my PhD, that was an extremely humbling experience. And I tell people like doing that sort of like people getting on one of those Twitter fights. People will say, "Well, are you saying that the only people who can talk about this stuff are people who have PhDs?" I said, "No, I've met plenty of people who have undergraduate or not even degrees who are very, very intelligent when it comes to this stuff." But again, probability equation. If you've done a PhD, there's probably a higher probability that you're not full of it. Now, there's still some PhDs that are full of it, but less likely so.
I think there's also, and I know on the medical side, it's important to have, I'm wondering if it's the same on the sort of bench science side, is a real familiarity with the literature, what's published. So you sort of see the spectrum of what people are doing, what the outcomes have been, how people are thinking, what kind of statistical analysis they've done. If you haven't read all the literature, not all, but wide ranges of literature in some particular question you're trying to answer, you don't know where you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, and trying to kind of, even realizing that when you read scientific papers, if you're just reading like the abstract or the conclusion, like that's just somebody's opinion. That's just the researcher's opinion. Like actually, like if you really want to know the answer to a question, sitting down and actually taking the time to kind of sift through the data. And this is a very painstaking process. Yep. I tell people, I feel really bad for the average person who's trying to get, advice on nutrition because, what most people are attracted to is going to be the person who's speaking very authoritatively, who's very sure of themselves, who's saying, nope, carbs are evil. That's why you can't lose weight. Yeah. Instead of somebody saying, well, if low carb helps you with satiety and adherence, then it's probably a little bit better. But, for some people, it's actually worse. And, it doesn't seem to be better than a calorie protein equated non-ketogenic diet. But that's not what people want to hear. People say, well, insulin blocks all fat burning. So, you just got to cut your insulin out by stopping taking it. And the reality is like, I always joke, I say, the body has tens of thousands of metabolic processes all going on at the same time, enormously complex, but we're pretty sure it's just carbs.
Each cell has tens of thousands going on simultaneously. We don't even know the relationship amongst the cells oftentimes. But exactly. Yeah. But I want to sort of hang a lantern on something you said there, which is each each individual's biology is slightly different too. On top of that, so good for some, not good for others. That's why I was resisting your stuff when you'd always try to get me to do stuff. If you notice, my language is always very similar to what
I understand that.
I'd always go,
but I would
maybe,
never recommend something saying that this is the way to do it and it's a panacea.
No.
I would say to you,
I know.
I'm hearing your given set of problems.
Yeah.
This is what I'm recommending.
I get it, but what I'm telling you is when you see me, I ruminate about stuff for a long time before I make a decision because of the same skepticism you're hearing Layne sort of suggest. So.
Let's dive right into that, which is really kind of probably the biggest thorn in your side right now, and that is these very aggressive kind of keto warriors.
Isn't it weird we're in that world?
And I'm not. And I'm.
Is this a new thing?
I think it is. I think it's almost a extrapolation of Trump political.
Well, I was going to say, I think right. I think the extremism in the politics. I think our lack of religion has caused us to hang on to other things and act religiously.
Oh, you just got yourself into a new fucking war with saying
well,
that.
Actually,
but no, because
I can explain this very easily.
But I will tell you, Layne, it pertains to addiction and recovery. People get religious about that. Certain mental health ideas, they get religious. They just get this religious fervor around things that are not religious.
Yeah.
They're scientific questions.
People like to belong to something.
Yeah.
That's why. I mean, if you ever posted about artificial sweeteners, if you ever post something about maybe artificial sweeteners aren't the devil, you will have hundreds of people come on. I had a lady tell me that I should lose my PhD because I said that aspartame wasn't poison.
But think of that psychology. Think of that psychology. It's first of all, it's sort of flat Earth psychology, right? It's like my worldview is dependent on anti-vax, anti-aspartame, whatever it is, and you as a scientist must be destroyed for even questioning my worldview, which is a very primitive, very bizarre way to look at the world, everybody. And unfortunately, a lot of people are that way these days.
Do you think that it's just tribalism, Layne?
Well, but it's just tribalism. It's just narcissism when you get right down to it. But go ahead.
I think a lot of it is tribalism. I think that, so you mentioned politics, Drew. I think one of the things that's interesting, and I come up from a personal perspective. So I would be considered, I'm going to alienate everybody on the show, but I would be considered, I guess, what it would be like a classic libertarian, I guess would be my politics.
You understand something. Most people are in the middle. We're all being held hostage.
Right.
We're all being held hostage by the extremes.
The fringes.
But that's what happens is because people they'll, like, for example, I own guns. I like to shoot. It's one of my hobbies. I'm a believer in the Second Amendment. So I was a member of the NRA for a while. And I would I was like, okay, well, this is important. But then there was other stances that I found myself starting to take and then having to step back and say, wait, I don't actually believe that. Why am I siding with this? Yeah. And I think it's just that, you buy into one thing and then you feel like you got to buy into it. My parents are libertarians, 100%. They're like me, but they identify as Republicans. And I'm like, you guys aren't Republicans.
Right.
Right. What are you doing? You're not a Republican. You don't believe this stuff.
Yeah.
Half this stuff that you guys are watching is garbage. So I think that can translate over to almost anything, so because something works for one person. So because somebody has success on, for example, a keto diet, they're so fervent about that. And then they get together with other people who they've seen have success. And they say, well, this is the solution. Why can't everybody do that? And I heard my friend Greg Knuckles, he said something one time that I think was great.
Sounds like a mafia hitman. I'm Greg Knuckles.
Either that or Dick Tracy character.
Seriously.
He's actually probably one of the smartest people in fitness. This guy got a 1600 on his SAT as like a 15-year-old.
Oh, geez.
And now he just
white
writes.
Guy?
What's that?
This is a non-Asian?
A non-Asian.
Wow.
Yeah, has a fabulous beard, a beer connoisseur, and actually a world record for a little while, world record powerlifting holder. Very strong guy too.
Cool.
Damn.
But Greg said, bros and bros make the mistake of because something worked for them, they believe they want to apply it to everybody.
Right.
And people who are science advocates, sometimes we make the mistake of because something was best for the average. We tried to then say it should work for the individual.
Okay, so talk about because that's a great that's the failure of how we statistically analyze clinical science, particularly now, right?
Yeah, because I tell people, I think we start at the average, but you're not an average.
Yeah.
you're not an average. You're an individual, right?
Yep.
So we want to start at the average with our recommendations because on average, it's going to be the best outcome. But understanding that some people, even though in studies we see no difference with, low carb versus low fat versus if calories are equated, for certain individuals, some things may be better. And I'm not discounting that. What I'm discounting is trying to apply specific diets to everybody, saying that's the 100% everybody should do it that way. And, I think like for me, I've coached probably over 1,500 people in the past 14 years. And I think one of the things that was, if you're just paying attention and you work with that many people, you figure a lot of this stuff out on your own. If you're just paying attention, instead of just dogmatically trying to do the same things over and over and over again, because the way I coach now is so different than how I did it 13 years ago. But I think people, and even in the medical profession, even in the science profession, we can get so locked into a position, especially if we get attacked a lot, that we just say, no, this is how it's done and this is how you should do it.
And getting back to that, I've seen you. The only comparison I could make is seeing my friends who hunt, and I've just started to dabble into the world of hunting. How quickly you will be attacked, and with almost an irrational fervor by the animal rights people. You get attacked by the low carb community in a way that I almost can't explain it, because you're just a guy trying to give health and fitness advice, and you're damn good at it. I don't understand why, if something works for someone, why they have to then attack you. Has this been something that's been going on for a long time, and I just took?
And by the way, if he figures it out, remember how people attack me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I wonder if he's getting maybe it's something about the way we present these things.
If
he figures it out, I want to hear it, because
that was kind of my question. Is this been something that's been going on for the entirety of your career, and I'm just catching wind of it, or is this something that's kind of blown up with this explosion of keto?
I think it's that, but I think I've kind of like battled different groups on and off. I'm kind of the kind of person, like I'm not a punch you in the face kind of guy. Like I'm not just going to start going after people.
Sure.
But if somebody comes after me, I'm going to tell you how I really feel. Like if you say something to me, I'm probably going to tell you exactly how I feel about it. Just
so I
probably
guess,
get it from my mom, to be honest.
Having really clear, deliberate opinions today is just, you're going to get attacked.
Yeah,
that's the way it is.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And I've told people, even if you're just passionate about something, you'll get attacked.
Yeah,
if you're passionate about something, you'll get attacked.
Insane.
I think that what's funny is I've actually never said that low carb is bad or low carb. Some people will try to come from the perspective of, because they don't like keto zealots, they'll come, well, low carb is actually bad for you. I think there's no data to suggest that. I think that, if you look at the statistics on dieting, we don't have a weight loss problem. 6 out of every 7 people who lose weight in their lifetime, or who are obese, will lose a significant amount of body weight in their lifetime. Think about everybody that's ever been fat. Some of them have done a diet, and some of them have gotten off a decent amount. The problem is that the relapse statistics are absolutely staggering. Within 1 year, 70% relapse to a previous weight. Within 2 years, it's 85%. Within 3 years, it's 95%. So that means diets have a 95% failure rate. In fact, almost comically, there was a review that came out in I think it was American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, that basically said that dieting was not an effective weight loss strategy for long term. And so I think what we really need to focus on is everything has to start with adherence. The problem is that things like keto or things like paleo or things where you're just cutting out food groups or you're just cutting out a bunch of different stuff. I always tell people, hey, that's great if you can lose 30 pounds on it, but are you going to stick to that for the rest of your life? Like, is that going to actually become a lifestyle for you?
That's where Drew's at right now. That's where Dr. Drew's right at.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure that out.
So it's very difficult. You have to find something. I think it's where your lifestyle, caloric restriction, and activity can kind of intersect.
Also, there's another feature that I've never had before when I was managing diet, was the the reward of feeling as good as I do is so reinforcing that it motivates me in a way no other maintenance has. In other words, I'm actually phobic of losing how I'm feeling. It's a weird shift in my thinking, although I'm having weird cravings and I'm kind of feeling like I'm plateauing and probably adding some carbs is a smart idea. And I'm worried that I'm actually going to slip into, I'm so carb motivated, I'm sort of addicted to them. I'm afraid I'm going to chip and then slip all the way back in.
Well, I think that, if losing weight and then keeping it off is the goal, there's a couple of different factors that come, because actually not only are the relapse statistics bad, 1/3 to 2/3 of people who lose weight actually put on more than they lost. Yeah. This is kind of your classic yo-yo dieters. I think a lot more data is going to come out in the future on basically that adherence is very individual, and what is going to be the best diet for one person is going to be very different to what's the best diet for another person.
Yep.
And it's going to come down to what can that person stick to? What is good for that individual and their lifestyle? And for some people, I have friends who, they can eat reduced carb. I think ketogenic is almost, people can't even stick to it for epilepsy when it could possibly save their life.
Right.
So I think it's pretty unmaintainable for most people. But I think a reduced carbohydrate intake with a little bit more fat is probably a little bit more sustainable in a lot of ways, because you can go to, say, a restaurant and you can find lower carbohydrate dishes, but it's pretty hard to eat out and be social when you're eating a really low fat diet. Those things are pretty tough. But for some people, they don't mind it. They don't mind doing low fat. So what I always say is, hey, the great news is if calories and protein are equated, because protein does seem to have a benefit on satiety and thermogenesis. But if calories, protein, and fiber are equated, you can kind of do whatever you want with carbs and fat, which is great news because it means it's up to you, right? So I think that we're going to get more individual data on what works better for individuals. They actually did a study where they allowed people to diet for a certain period of time, and then they let them self-select diets. They calorically restricted them, and they found that the relapse statistics were better than usual because they let them self-select a diet that they enjoyed, essentially.
Gotcha. And I'm not really looking for weight loss, really. I'm just trying to get an optimal kind of diet. And we got into this because you got me lifting heavier weights again. And I'm not quite sure what my goal is, to tell you the truth. I just like how I feel on this more than anything.
Well, then that's great.
Yeah.
In fact, I always tell people, even though we have this data that calorie restriction seems to do something well, calorie restriction, when done too much, is a really bad thing. In fact, there's way too many people out there who diet way too often. And it over the long term actually lowers their metabolic rate in the long term, makes it more difficult to lose weight. So there's a fine balance between making sure that you're lean enough, but also not dieting too frequently as well.
Right.
So just lifting, but the best things you can do for your body are eat with some kind of restriction. Even if you're not below your maintenance calories, if you're just eating with restriction, you're not eating like a glutton, that's good. Resistance training, really good. And some form of aerobic training, a little bit of it, probably also good.
Let me ask you, you mentioned bulk and passing, and why are people worried about that when you can get more?
Hold on, and let me interject. For the people that are listening that are bodybuilders, Dr. Drew's talking about fiber.
Fiber.
He's not talking about bulk session.
Yeah, fiber.
Bulk
I meant fiber. I should have said fiber.
Okay.
I just think of fiber and bulk is the same way. People go, oh, that diet's no good. There's not enough fiber. I think, well, then take 2 fistfuls of psyllium husk. What the hell? That's way more fiber and bulk than you'll get in any other diet. Why is there something wrong with bulk supplements, fiber supplements?
I think fiber supplements are great. Yeah. I do think that if you look at some of the micronutrients in vegetables,
that's different. That's a different issue. I heard people sometimes. I was talking about the carnivore or something. They went, "There's not enough bulk." I went, "Oh," and I went. Well, I take psyllium husk, and I got tons of fiber and tons of bulk, and that's that. But go ahead, finish.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. If you look at the research data, it seems to suggest if you equate for fiber and whatnot, and as long as you're getting enough insoluble fiber as well, because most of the fiber supplements out there tend to be soluble fiber. But as long as you're getting enough insoluble fiber as well, I think that's good. I think that vegetables probably do contain some micronutrients like the sulforaphanes and those sorts of things, lycopenes that do have some modest health benefits.
Sure.
And I always tell people, like, the more variety you can include in your diet, usually the better off you're going to be, just because you're getting a broad spectrum of micronutrients that way. But at the end of the day, everything has to boil back to, okay, what are the main priorities? And one of the main priorities is adherence. So regardless of whether or not something may get you a little more vitamin C, if another style of eating enables you to be more consistent, then that's probably a better style of eating for you. So I always tell people, like, this is what nobody wants to admit, is if you do something that's really good for cancer, you might actually do something that's bad for heart disease. Or if you do something that's really good for diabetes, some other health problem, then, or for like sarcopenia or bone health, then you might do something that's really bad for something else. And trying to kind of balance these things, the idea that there's this one magical diet that fixes everything, that's just not true.
No, because
there probably are trade-offs.
The recommendations are based on specific questions. Let's reduce heart disease. Here's a dietary procedures that reduces heart disease. May increase the risk of cancer, may make you live shorter. Right. But it will reduce the risk of heart disease. So you have to understand, science only answers very specific questions.
Getting into that and extrapolating on that exact point, so many people I see, Layne, just in my real amateur involvement in giving advice on lifting and weight, nutrition and stuff. So many people make that same mistake, but with their lifestyle, meaning they follow a diet that may be great for a power lifter, but they're an endurance athlete, or they follow something. They're a CrossFitter and they're trying to go keto. Do you see a lot of problem with people kind of compromising their performance and their physique in one way in hopes of gaining an advantage in another?
Yeah, I mean, LeBron James went on a vegetarian diet. I mean, he's the greatest basketballer in the world, but and listen, I have no problems with, I admire people who, they make an ethical stand and they say, okay, I'm not for the way animals are treated. Okay, fine. But it's going to compromise your performance. Like, that's just how it goes. Same thing with keto. Like, people want to make, if you're doing any kind of anaerobic or sprint sort of stuff, like keto, you can't use ketones for anaerobic exercise. You have to use glucose. That's just how it is. So yes, I think that people need to eat for whatever specifically they're going to do, especially if you're talking about athletes. Eat for your sport. And, when it comes to, actually, it was really interesting. There was a survey done of competitive bodybuilders, and this goes back to the whole low carb thing. They actually found that the bodybuilders who tended to win more shows, and this is just a correlation study, actually had the higher carb intakes. So bodybuilders who were winning more shows had higher levels of carbohydrate intake. Now, I think probably the way to look at that is they have probably faster metabolisms, and they're probably a little bit better genetically, right?
Yeah.
But what it certainly also says is that carbohydrates weren't hurting them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, that these things, again, boil so much down to the individuality and even individual metabolic rates. I mean, I've seen huge differences from people I've worked. I've had people who I've had over 5,000 calories a day who weigh 170 pounds and they're maintaining their body weight.
Yeah.
And they're not even that active either. Right now, they might fidget a lot. They might have a lot of what we call neat non-exercise adaptive thermogenesis, but they're not like going out and running marathons or anything. And by the same contrast, I've had people who are literally endurance athletes who can maintain their body weight on levels of calories that you would not believe, because you think it'd be impossible because it's so low. And I just think it's incredible, the amount of genetic diversity. I did my PhD. We were working with rodents, and people poo-poo rat studies, but with rats, if you're looking at a specific question, I can get a genetically undiverse Homo homozygous population,
Yeah.
apply a treatment,
Yeah.
and I can be pretty darn sure that whatever happens to them, if there's any differences, that it was because of the treatment, not because of just basic genetic differences.
Speaking of
and
genetics,
that's one of the problems you get when you work with humans.
any opinion on? I know we have to take a little break,
Okay.
but maybe after the break we answer this question, which is these fitness genetic profiling that's going on these days. There are a few different organizations out there, both from the standpoint of dietary recommendations and muscle performance
And training.
So.
We'll take a real quick break, and then we will get Layne's take on that. Again, our guest is Dr. Layne Norton, and we'll be right back.
Well, it's about time for athletes, trainers to report for the start of the fall season, but we are still dealing with that extreme heat. So even if you're training indoors, dehydration is a major issue for amateurs and pros. Water, sports drinks, they do not do a great job. I've known this for a long time. That's why I wanted to develop a product. Instead, Hydralite came along, so I strongly suggest you stay ahead of your hydration with Hydralite. The best way to stay hydrated is with a proper balance of sodium, glucose, and water, and Hydralite does this better than anything else I've tried. Everyone here swears by it, my wife, my kids, my patients. I use it if patients need rehydration. It's a way to replete hydration orally. This gets you ahead of the game, and so you can sometimes avoid hospitalization things in my experience. Hydralite comes in great flavors like orange berry and lemonade, available as a pre-mixed drink, a powder, or my personal preference is these effervescence tablets. You simply drop in a glass of water or a bottle of water. Literally, we don't leave home without these. Compared to sports drinks, Hydralite delivers up to 4 times the electrolytes with 75% less sugars. Hydralite solutions are appropriate for all ages, and each bottle or package includes easy-to-follow instructions. This is the best hydration product out there, period, end. You can find Hydralite at Rite Aid or at hydralite.com/Dr. Drew, DRDREW. And for a limited time, our listeners can save 30% on Hydralite. I just sent my daughter over to buy this stuff. She's like, I need Hydralite. I'm like, go to the website and use the code Dr. Drew 18, DRDREW 18 at checkout. That is HYDRALYTE.com, hydralite.com/DRDREW 18. To use that code, get 30% off. You won't need any other hydration products. It's the best.
Back here on the Swole Patrol, Layne Norton, our guest at BioLayne on Twitter, and then BioLayne.com, a website I can't recommend enough. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Layne, the question we were talking about right before the break, a lot of the, we're starting to see genetic testing come up, and people are using it to kind of cater their training and their diet. Any feelings on that?
I will qualify this by saying I have not looked super in depth at this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'll qualify by that, but I'll give you my gut feeling based on based on my research in grad school and whatnot. I think that we have a lot of sequences, genomic profiles, those sorts of things. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to get a ton of information. I think right now we don't have enough information to, even though we can sequence DNA, we can look at DNA, we know what a genetic profile looks like. I don't think we have enough information to make recommendations based on a genetic profile
at least not on a large scale basis. That makes sense to me. I got to tell you, I did an evaluation with Fitness Genes, and they pretty much nailed me. They pretty much he was telling me stuff that I already knew, that trainers had been telling me otherwise for a long time, and I was like, well, then that actually motivated me. That's how I ended up lifting the heavy weights again. Yeah, because he'd sort of given me permission, like, well, that's your your muscle metabolism sort of set up that way, and I was like, I knew it. I knew it. That's the only thing I like doing. It's the only thing I'm capable of doing. The only thing I get progress from and feel like I'm getting something out of. And then Mark Bell put the capper on.
Yeah, he finally put the nail in the coffin. We were talking about BioLayne.com, your website, and really a wealth of great information. And we talked so much, really extensively now about the individuality of a person. And I would imagine that carries over into training as well. And I think your workout builder is probably the most practical solution I've seen out there, especially for, as far as internet resources. And tell me a little bit about it and how you came to develop what I think to be just a really, really fantastic and extensive workout builder that kind of
I'm looking it
caters
up
to.
right now. It's called Workout Builder.
They go biolane.com.
Okay, all right.
Dr. Drew's doing it
I'm
as we
doing it right
speak,
now.
and I hope listeners are as well. But you just really, I mean, it does something that a lot of places don't do, and that is it caters the training to your desired goal, which is something that so many people screw up.
Yeah, so I mean that actually started with my partner in the website, Chris Spacuzza. He's the developer on the development side, and he said, would you think about? I had a program on bodybuilding.com called PH3, and it was really a much different training program than anybody there had ever seen or filmed. We did a big feature for it. He's like, what about doing something like this for the website, but having different profiles? So we have, something for everybody. We have things for women, things for men. We have beginner, intermediate, advanced. We have different things for different goals. And when we started doing that, and then I said, well, the problem is that not everybody has access to certain equipment. Not everybody not everybody wants to do the same exercise every week, that sort of thing. So we set it up modular so that even though each program is basically a 12-week training template, it's completely customizable in terms of your exercise selection. And we're actually planning to grow this a lot more. My personal powerlifting coach, his name's Andres Vargas. He has a master's in exercise science, really smart guy.
That guy just sounds strong.
Andres Vargas?
Andres Vargas just sounds like someone who powerlifts a lot.
Have you ever noticed that, just a side rant, that all the strongman competitors, their names sound exactly like what you would expect?
Yes.
Sojournas Savickas, Magnus for Magnuson, like it was like they were just born and they were like, you're going to be really freaking strong.
Yeah. No, God put them on this earth to do one thing and they found it.
That's right. Yeah. You never see like a Bobby Smith in The World's Strongest Man, So, that was kind of how we came up with the workout builder. And I think we've got about 20 templates right now, and we're coming out with more and more every week. So we plan to expand that and make it even bigger. So that's been a big focus, as well as I finally wrote a book after 15 years, probably 6 years later than I should have written it, but still got it anyway. And
was this, an undertaking that you actually questioned while you were doing it? Because I don't know what went into it, but just from an outsider's point of view, it seemed like something that took an extraordinary amount of work.
A lot of work. Because, I'm starting out, I do my programming in Excel, and then, you have to kind of come up with a program, first of all, that you think is going to work well. And then you have to kind of make that program now go into code on the back end, and then make it look pretty on the front end. And, from A to B to C, it probably took us about a year to get it cranking, pretty well. And that's working on it quite a bit. So, you guys probably know this, if you've had any experience with, having a website or anything like that, like stuff always takes way longer than you think it's going to take.
Yeah.
And so, so we're expanding that. It seems like that people, this is going to be something that people want, and some form of automation is the future. Like personal coaching, I think there's always going to be a place for the stuff I do, because people love having feedback from a person, but not everybody can afford hundreds of dollars a month on a nutrition coach or somebody to do training and programming for them. So giving them an option that's, I think we're at like $12.99 a month, that's a great option for a lot of people who wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise.
The biggest thing that I see when I scroll through your Twitter feuds, and I do it frequently, I laugh my ass off. I sit back and just laugh hysterically. But one of the things that I see that really irks me is that there is a handful, not all, but there's a handful of really radical kind of keto religious people that try to push the idea that overall calorie consumption doesn't matter in the absence of certain macronutrients. And, from a guy who's been through it coaching clients, from a guy who's been through it with his own physique, and now as a man of science, how untrue is that? Because to me, it just seems blasphemous.
I think people misunderstand certain. So when you say something like, okay, there was a recent study that came out of Dr. Bill Campbell's lab at USF, and Bill's a really fantastic researcher. And they found that when they overfed protein, they got very little fat deposition for the amount of calories they overfed. And so people will use something like that and say, see, calories don't actually matter because they fed them all these calories and they didn't put on as much body fat as they should have. That you're making it, that's a completely separate argument. Well, what that means is that protein is an inefficient source of body fat storage. It doesn't mean that calories don't count. Plus, people who are eating more protein, they're probably also eating less carbohydrates and fats. So when you look at, like protein and fiber, they're about 30, they have a what we call thermic effective food, which is a TEF. And they're about 30%. Fat, carbohydrates are about 6 to 8%, and fats are about 2 to 3%. So if you eat a diet higher in protein, you could be calorie matched. You could be two diets, one's at 2,000 calories and has 200 grams of protein. The other has 100 grams of protein. The diet with 200 grams of protein, if all calories are matched, you're probably going to see a little bit more weight loss, or at least better retention of lean body mass. And so people will take that and say, well, calories don't count. Well, that's not what that's saying. Calories do count. It just means that if you're on a higher protein diet, you probably can consume a little bit more calories and still maintain your body weight. It doesn't mean they don't count, right? If you're saying calories don't count, then what you're saying is that the thermodynamics don't matter. The first law of thermodynamics, somehow there's magic going on.
But by the way, the thermogenicity, I feel like plateaued in some way in my diet. Is there an adjustment that goes on? Is there some thyroid metabolism involved here or something?
Well, metabolism adapts all the time. Yeah. It's actually one of my passions to learn about. I've gotten really, really into this. Yes. So for example, if you diet down, I'm going to take it from the opposite direction for now. But if you diet, we used to think that the slowing of metabolic rate from dieting was simply because you lost mass. So if you have less mass, less energy costs to move around. And what we know now is that's not true. In fact, your body basically overreacts to dieting.
Well, evolutionarily it should, right? Just from an evolutionary perspective, your body should go, oh crap, starvation coming, get ready.
That's exactly right. So there's a researcher named Dan McLean at the University of Denver, and he had a line. He did a huge review called Biology's Response to Dieting, the Impetus for Weight Regain. It was fantastic. Best review paper I've ever read. But he said a line in it. He said, dieting activates the body's self-defense system. Yeah. Or dieting kind of improperly, like crash dieting. And you see this with people who have dieted many times over the course of their life, kind of fad dieting, yo-yo dieting. They get to the point where they have a very hard time losing weight, regardless of how low they take their calories. So you get this activation of your body's self-defense system, and it affects so many things. It'll affect your basal metabolic rate. You'll affect your NEAT. It affects your even the adipose cells. So this is what's really cool. We used to think that adipose tissue was just this like
inert,
amorphous, inert tissue. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we know that adipose is actually an organ. Yeah. It fits every definition of an organ. It receives hormonal signals. It sends out hormonal signals. It talks to the brain. Yep. You have things like leptin, which is kind of your body's body fat thermostat, for lack of a better term. And even the changes that occur to the adipocyte when you're dieting, the reduction in flux of fatty acids and carbohydrate across the adipocyte cause, in fact, they've shown that dieting places a strain on the extracellular matrix of your adipose tissue that predisposes you to weight regain when you finish dieting. Yeah. So one of the things I talk about a lot in my talks is make sure if you're dieting, you also focus on the diet after the diet, that you're not just thinking about, okay, Because most people, when they finish diet, they're like, oh, I can't wait to eat, this and this and this. And it's like, well, you're just with that mentality, you're just going to gain it all back anyway.
Fast. Yeah.
And there's actually some research that shows, because at the end of the diet, if you're talking about a long diet where you're low calories, the hormonal milieu, low reduced thyroid, increased stress on the extracellular matrix, that you can actually form new fat cells if you regain body fat too quickly.
Yeah, I'd heard about that. Yeah.
And it's pretty fascinating stuff because, like I said, we used to think about, and we also know now there's fat cell turnover. We used to think that fat cells, just whatever number you had was what you had. Now we know that your body's making new fat cells and destroying old fat cells simultaneously. It's just that almost is at equilibrium almost all the time and is extremely tightly controlled. But when you get in specific circumstances, and if you think about how the body would react to famine, if you're going back into, say, caveman days, if not only would it want a lower metabolic rate if you were in a time of famine, it would also want to make it so that if you came across a massive food source, back in 10,000, 20,000 years ago, we couldn't just throw stuff in the fridge. Right. So if you came across a massive food stuff, you would want to be able to capture all that energy. You would not want to waste any of it. And you can only store so much fat per unit time into an adipose cell. So if you were exceeding your body's ability to store that rate, it could trigger what we call a differentiation of pre-adipocytes into fully formed adipocytes. So that stuff I just find absolutely fascinating.
And it's biology at its core. And so, whenever you want to think, does this biologically make sense? You always have to think evolutionarily. And that's what,
yes.
And I very rarely hear people talk about diet from an evolutionary perspective. So
my PhD advisor, Dr Layne, was fantastic at doing that. He would always say, Layne, why do you think this happens this way?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh man, come on. I'm just trying to get finished with this
but
stuff.
It's just confirmation. It just helps you understand, it helps you sort of frame whatever it is you're observing.
That's right. I mean, he asked me one time. So the amino acid, the body kind of evolved to sense one amino acid in terms of, out of all the 20, the spectrum in protein, instead of sensing every individual amino acid to trigger muscle protein synthesis, it basically senses one. It senses leucine. And one day he asked me, he said, Layne, why do you think the body did this? Teleologically, why did you think the body did this? And I was a second year grad student, so I was kind of fumbling around my words and didn't really, was kind of unconfident. And he said, well, you would want something that wasn't largely extracted by the gut and liver, because if you were talking about like an amino acid that got extracted by the gut and liver, then the levels that you took in weren't going to be reflected as terms of what the muscle sees. Mm-hmm. So you'd want something that the muscle would see what's reflected in the diet. And then you would want something that has passive diffusion across the cell wall, that was equilibrium driven, that wasn't active transport, which is how leucine is. And so, just hearing him talk about that kind of stuff, it always got me thinking, like you said, when you look at something or you look at a hypothesis or anybody makes statements, you say, does this make sense in terms of evolution? Yeah. Because you have to think about, I always tell people this when they're having trouble getting lean, and I'll say, well, your body cares about keeping you alive long enough to pass on your genetic material. That's what your body wants to do.
Period.
It does not care about you having a six pack. It really doesn't.
That's right. No, that's absolutely true.
And that being said, and I'm talking as the only layman here in the conversation, would it behoove you to maximize your leucine intake, but from finding the right protein sources that are high in leucine, or supplementing with?
Supplementation, leucine doesn't appear to be a muscle builder because you need the other amino acids to actually build the peptides that are that are in muscle. But I would say it's more of an anti-catabolic agent and more of a recovery agent. They have shown that so leucine is one of the 3 branched chain amino acids, and the 3 branched chain amino acids, when supplemented, seem to improve recovery from workouts. So they decrease soreness, improve time to strength recovery, and seem to kind of jumpstart the process. But, if you're getting enough protein overall in your day, that seems to be by far the most important thing. So I think, and for example, the sources of protein that you would think would be the best are the ones that are highest in leucine. So like whey protein is the highest source of leucine
yeah.
of any protein source that I know of. It's about 10 to 12%. And then, things like eggs are about 9%. And then, all the meats are around 8%. So those are all really good sources of leucine. You get into something like wheat protein. Wheat is pretty poor, about 6.8% leucine. And in fact, a lot of the studies we did in my PhD, were looking at feeding the same amounts of protein, of total protein, but just varying the protein source and just seeing if we got any differences. In our final experiment, we fed either wheat, soy, egg, or whey protein as the only source of protein for these animals, and then looked at what happened to their not only their markers of muscle protein metabolism, but also their body mass and their muscle weights. And we found that animals fed whey and egg had better outcomes muscle-wise than animals fed wheat and soy. So, I mean, now people will take that and say, well, does that mean that, you can't build muscle if you're vegetarian? No, that doesn't mean that at all. Plenty of vegetarians and vegans build muscle. Are you going to build as much muscle as you would if you included some of these better protein sources? That's hard to say. Now, I will say that if you take a poor quality protein source like wheat and you eat enough of it, it still has the same anabolic effect. But like, for example, something like wheat, you might need, say, 50 grams, whereas with whey protein, you'd only need 30 grams.
Right.
So the thresholds change. And we even we showed that it really was leucine that was causing this difference, because we took wheat protein, which is a pretty poor protein source, and just added free leucine to make it the same concentration as whey protein. That was the only thing we changed. And we found that the results in terms of muscle and muscle protein metabolism became equated, were exactly the same. So another option for vegans or vegetarians, I know this question wasn't asked, but I can hear the audience wondering it.
That's a great answer.
Is if you are a vegan or vegetarian, then something like a supplemental leucine or supplemental branched chain amino acids, then they really can have a really, really positive effect on improving the quality of your protein sources.
I have a question, and this is a bit self-serving, at least for my partner here.
Perfect.
You're someone that I gather is recovering from a major injury.
Yeah.
How would you cater lifting heavy to a man like Mr. Dr. Drew Pinsky, who has a bum shoulder? Is there ways to supplement with the physical therapy, or is it something you just got to kind of train around?
If you weight train and you weight train heavy, I mean, there's going to be some soft tissue injuries. That's kind of the nature of the game. That's one of the downsides to it. Me personally, I've torn a pectoral in my time. That was probably the most major injury I had, because that required surgery. Nothing else I ever did required surgery. I have what's been hampering me for the last couple of years. I have a bulge disc between L4, L5, which is kind of the squatter's injury.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that kind of flares up here and there. I don't know if I would call it major. It's very painful when it acts up, but in terms of like something that requires surgery, there's a lot of, and I'm not a lower back health expert by any stretch of the imagination, but the outcomes for lower back surgery are pretty awful.
Terrible, especially for pain. Don't ever do it for pain.
Yeah.
If you lose function in one of your limbs, you got to do it, but otherwise forget it.
Yeah, from my understanding, the only reason you would ever want to have lower back surgery in terms of disc stuff is if that disc was actually causing a nerve to start to act, like really rubbing a nerve so bad that it was going to cause permanent nerve damage.
Well, no, only motoric or positioning. If it's sensory, don't worry about it. But if it's motoric, yes, then you want to do something.
Yeah, and there's a recent study that came out that showed, I think, something like 60% of people who have disc, like either herniated discs or bulge discs, have spontaneous resorption of those discs.
It's more like 100%. It's closer to that. So I'm being facetious, but it's a huge number, huge percentage, and again, particularly when it's pain and not muscle wasting and positioning problem, that kind of thing.
Right. So for me, it was very painful, but it's more about finding the right balance of, okay, how hard can I train? What style can I train? And how much rehab and prehab do I have to do to limit that? And also it's about being smart, because, at the end of the day, I'm somebody who will overdo it more than I'll underdo it.
Yeah.
Like I'll be in a lot of pain and I'll go, no, I'll be okay. And so it's taking some of those days and saying, all right, discretion is the better part of valor. Let's walk out of the gym today versus trying to plow through it. You said something that I think is really good. Physical therapy. If you can find a good physical therapist, and when I say good, I mean somebody that can teach you how to move, somebody who is a really good movement specialist, and then can also look at problems you're having and correct those with corrective exercise. I had a really good PT named Jamie Alumbra. I had a hip injury years ago that actually took me out of the world championships. It sucked. And it was diagnosed as bursitis, and they wanted to go in and remove my bursa on my hip. Yeah. And, it fit some of the characteristics of bursitis in terms of it hurt, but I went and started learning about bursitis, and turns out that that's kind of a garbage can term for general hip pain that they can't identify. And I went to another doctor. He said, well, before we go cutting your bursa sac out, and, he's like, by the way, that's there for a reason. Why don't we refer you to a physical therapist? So the first thing she said was, let's get you moving better. Let's figure out what causes pain. Let's figure out what doesn't cause pain. Let's work in the realm of what doesn't cause pain. Let's get you moving better. And man, it was, before I went to her, squatting 135 pounds was a 9 out of 10 pain in that hip.
Oh.
And after working with her for 3 weeks, it wasn't pain-free, but I could squat to depth without a ton of pain. And it blew my mind that just doing, little band exercises for my glutes and my adduction that would make such a difference, but it did, But, I'm not saying that fixes everything, but I think having a good physical therapist can make a huge difference for people with some injuries.
For sure. They're very, very well trained. It's interesting to me. I've sort of wondered a little about this, and really just this is almost a rhetorical question, but how much, I deal with people whose pain perception is amplified, and their pains, the way they perceive pain is abnormally intense and abnormally emotionally charged. I sometimes think people lift weights become immune to pain a little bit.
I definitely
think we ignore pain in a way that may not be that healthy. We just get used to discomfort and pain. It doesn't bother us. We don't pay attention to it.
There was actually a lower back specialist who came and spoke at the University of Illinois while I was there, and I went and saw him. And one of the things he said is that what he tended to see was that people who didn't lift weights or non-athletes, he said, would come into with an MRI, and they would say, oh my God, I'm in excruciating pain. Please help me. And I'd look at their MRI and I'd be like, you've got like one disc that's like barely moved.
Right, you've got what most humans have.
Right. If you take 100 Americans and MRI them, 60 of them will have herniated discs.
Absolutely.
And they're asymptomatic, by the way.
So whenever a patient goes, I have an L1, 2, 3, 4, disc bulging, it's like, okay, so do I. It's like, relax. Relax.
So, and then he said he'll get athletes that'll come in and they'll be like, it's something down there kind of bothering me a little bit, and he'll look at their MRI. He'll be like, well, you have 3 disc herniations, 2 disc bulges, and you have end plate fractures at all your vertebrae.
Yeah.
And I think when you train, one, you're used to dealing with pain.
Yep.
And so you learn to not listen to those as much.
Yeah.
But you can also, it can go the other way too. Like, I tell people, if something really hurts and, there's a difference between, okay, you've got some tendonitis in your knee or you've got some kind of nagging soft tissue injury versus you've got something that's intensely painful. Don't keep working on that and expect it to get better.
Right.
Because I sensitized my hip so much to the point where I couldn't even do anything. It started out being modestly painful when I was squatting at over 500 pounds. And I kept trying to work around it to the point where I couldn't even squat 135 pounds because I had sensitized it so much. So it can go the opposite direction too. But I think you're right. In general, just go lift weights, people. It's good for you.
Right.
Right. I think that if you look at a lot of the problems that are caused by disease, you don't even have to get people to lose weight. This is the dirty truth that people don't talk about. People could be fat and still be and have every metric of health be in check if they just lifted weights and did some activity.
Yeah.
Like it's actually extraordinarily fast how fast it will correct within months, and some people within weeks. If you just get them moving and doing some exercise, it's incredible. In fact, in weight loss, they show that almost all the benefits of weight loss are in like the first 10%. So it's pretty interesting. I don't even think that, like people draw this association between type 2 diabetes and obesity, and they say, well, one causes the other. I don't think either one causes the other one. I think they both evolve in parallel, and it's just from the same problems.
Yep. It's
overall unhealthy lifestyle.
Yep. Agreed.
My last question, and then we'll let you go. And it's been really just fantastic talking to you, Layne. And this, again, is going to be a little self-serving this time for me. In the long term, especially with application to your clients in bodybuilding and physique training, the use of stimulant and fat-burning agents, things like ephedrine and clenbuterol, is a lot of the scare tactics, are they something to be taken seriously, or in the long term are they relatively innocuous if they're used responsibly? Ephedrine and clenbuterol, yeah. In particular, those are the two.
Ephedra, how much is responsible with ephedra? Ephedra?
No, ephedrine.
Ephedrine. Okay.
Ephedrine.
Well, all right.
I think that with the exception of a few things, there's no free rides.
Sure.
Anything, it's like drugs, right? Like pharmaceuticals. Anything that has a pharmaceutical effect, there's a reason they list the side effects really quickly at the end of the commercial. You know what I mean? Like everything's got a price you got to pay. Now, some aren't that bad and some are really bad, things like, if you look at steroids overall, people say, well, if you just took low doses of steroids, and you were monitored by a doctor, is it really that unhealthy? No, it's probably not. It's probably not that bad for you. But things are, those kind of drugs can be addictive, just like anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you get some people who, they start taking it because they have self-image problems, and instead of addressing the root of the problem, they do that, and pretty soon they're taking every drug under the sun because they like the way it feels. So I think that steroids have probably gotten a relatively bad rap in terms of there's things out there that we prescribe all the time that are way worse for you than steroids. I mean, hell, you take four or what is it, like 8 times the amount of Tylenol you're supposed to take, and that can kill you. So I mean, in terms of compounds out there, there's probably stuff that's way worse that'll kill you way faster. I mean, alcohol and nicotine are still both legal.
Well, but this is another question. We always wonder why nicotine wasn't used as a weight loss drug.
And it is now, yeah, for sure.
In terms of like, if you look online at message boards, there's a lot of bodybuilders who use nicotine as a weight loss supplement.
Okay.
I'm
just wondering why medically it's not recommended for people that really are struggling.
Yeah, I guess. Well, it's like, all right, well, yeah, that's one of those things where which one do you want? Do you want the downsides of nicotine, or do you want the downsides of being obese?
I don't see much downside to nicotine
when it's isolated from the tobacco.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. I guess I was thinking about people who smoke, but nicotine
it sensitizes the adolescent brain in ways that are not good. But once you have an adult brain, I just don't see any downside if you're really having a medical problem with your weight, right, or diabetes or dietary management, whatever it might be.
Yeah, it is a very, very powerful appetite suppressant, which is why you also see people who quit smoking tend to gain a lot of weight.
Yeah.
One, because of the oral fixation, they switch to something else. But two, also because they're not having the nicotine anymore, and so they're very, very hungry because you're like you said, your body adapts to everything, right? So it wants to go back to homeostasis. Yep. It wants to go back to a baseline. So if you take nicotine for a really long time, your craving level is going to kind of gradually creep back up to what a normal human's craving level is, even when you're on nicotine, because you've been on it so long.
That's probably true.
Your body's adjusted to that. That's now your homeostasis. So now when you go off of it, you're ravenous, right? Just like other things, like if you take something long enough, You desensitize receptors.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how things go, but and things like clenbuterol, I think there's some liver toxicity associated with that, but I'm not completely sure. But I tell people, like, if you're going to do that, just first off, in my world, a lot of people do it for physique competition. Right. And I'm like, all right, if your goal is to win the Mr. Olympia one day, okay, I get it. That's going to be, you're going to have to do that. But if you're doing it because you think there's this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and you're going to have all these like lucrative contracts and, there are very few people get paid for photo shoots. That doesn't work that way. It's the other way around. You pay the photographer and then you use the photos to hopefully market yourself. So I think a lot of people do these drugs thinking they're going to get in this great shape and that's going to cause them to come into all this money. The reality is there's somebody that looks better than you at the health club right down the street. Yeah. So I'm under no delusions. Like I built a pretty good physique, but I can go into a gym and find somebody with a physique similar to mine who's willing to take absolutely nothing to shoot an ad for a supplement. Right. So I'm not going to get rich in that realm. I'm just, I'm different because I've got an education and I can talk about this stuff. But I think a lot of people get into the game of steroids because they think there is some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that's really vastly not true.
At BioLane on Twitter, and I can't recommend it enough. Even if you're not interested in fitness, you just want to see people get shit on. I go to at BioLane on Twitter, and then BioLane.com.
I want to look at these workout schedules. I was intrigued by the website. I'm into it.
BioLane.com is where you need to go, and then look at the workout builder. There's also a wealth of information there, just free articles about nutrition and things. Lane, dude, it was a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
And Mike, I wanted to mention our buddy Jason Ellis. His Ellis Mania is August 24th, 25th, and 26th, right? You'll be there.
Right.
I'll be there.
I'm fighting.
You're fighting?
Yes.
What are you doing?
Blindfold dog collar match.
Oh my God, that's the best, my favorite of all.
I know.
It's the most brutal of all.
It's easily the most brutal of all.
It's so explain what it is. It's the
I'm
most
blindfolded.
Well, it's the most beautiful, brutal, the most unbelievable, and the most hysterical. By far.
I would say
it's
one. Up there with Pinata.
Pinata's up there too. I got to give you. So go ahead. Tell them what it is.
It is a fight where there's 4 contestants in the ring at one time, and you are blindfolded and you are attached. There's a dog shock collar attached around your neck,
but not a little.
No, it floors you.
It floors
Guys
you.
Guys literally fall to the ground.
Their body goes stiff when it really goes off.
You start flailing like a fish.
And they usually put the dog collar in the hands of somebody, some hot chick on the sideline or something, right?
Yeah.
Just somebody just buzzes you. And then you're fighting, and you're fighting blindfolded. And is one hand tied behind you or something too?
No. Just you're
blindfolded.
You're boxing gloves and blindfolded, yeah.
Oh, my God.
So I'm going to run around randomly getting shocked and just swinging at nothing.
And then getting swung and hit, too.
Oh, I'm sure, but
randomly.
Probably not very much because we're all blindfolded.
Have you studied that whole...
Yes.
There are 4 people usually running around there.
I understand that, but when you're blindfolded, it's really hard to clock someone, especially in anywhere where it would really hurt. Right, you're just flailing, fair enough.
So we'll be, and I'm singing the national anthem.
Yes.
Again this year, so
it's the second fight. It's after the lightweight musical chairs, and then shock collar fight is at 8:05 p.m., so everybody has to go.
What day is that, Friday or Saturday?
It's all on Saturday.
Oh, it's all on Saturday.
The whole fight, the fights are all on Saturday.
Okay, Saturday night.
That's the big event.
There's like a trike race on Friday, and then some kind of a concert at the Hard Rock.
All of our Canadian friends, and I know there are lots of you because they all show up at the Hard Rock for the WrestleMania. I've never seen so many Canadians in my life in Las Vegas.
It's true. I've never seen more Canadians, even in Canada.
Right, he's got lots of Canadian fans. Very interesting.
It's right before the female music chairs and the strip chicks, so you're in the pussy area
in the window.
The first 4 are usually the pussy fighters.
I'm a giant. Meaning I'm a giant pussy.
Well, you were in the ring with Jason.
Yeah. I've been in the ring with Jason twice.
Yeah.
One time I had one fucking hand duct taped to another human being and my leg duct taped to another guy, and then I just got pounded in the fucking face because I couldn't defend myself.
Yeah, you have just one hand.
The other guy's trying to punch and defend himself, and I'm like, no, give me my right hand so that and Jason just literally looked across at me and goes, well, there's a free shot, and just drilled me.
Oh my god!
Drilled me in the face.
Oh, no.
Aren't you glad you're just singing the national anthem?
I'm glad I'm not working at his corner either. Is he doing a crazy fight? Obviously. What's he doing this year?
Jason's fighting
Kingsbury.
Kyle Kingsbury.
Oh, it's just the two of them. Now he's not going to fight 12 people this time. You know
No, he's only fighting one man. But Drew, I don't know if you know this fella. We might need to. He's huge.
Yeah.
He's a former UFC fighter.
Why is Jason doing this? Just because?
I think so. I think he really is driven to entertain.
Okay.
I think he's really driven to entertain.
He's trying to think of the most entertaining thing. All right. I get freaked out when I see those fights. They blow my mind because I get scared for my friends. You know what I mean? I get scared for you when you're in there. I get scared for him. And he made me sit on the corner with him one time when he was fighting. I mean, like he had like 9-10 fighters that one year, right?
Yeah. I'm having a crisis here. Sorry.
Uh-oh. Do you want to stop?
The Volvo keys are in my pocket, and my wife is at my parents' house without a car.
Uh-oh.
Now, with a car with no keys.
Is that why you Ubered? Because you only have one car?
Yeah, well, they drove out here with
now
us.
you have zero cars?
Everybody has zero
you don't
cars
have a backup key somewhere?
We do it in our house.
At home, but they're at his grandparents, his parents.
She went to my parents' house.
Oh, well.
So do we do a Uber for them now?
I guess to here, do you think? And then they can get the keys?
This is scintillating radio. Okay, kids.
Uber will TaskRabbit. They'll come pick it up or something like that, right?
I don't trust that.
I don't know. You want me to call her? Oh, well. Anyway. So,
Yeah, why don't let those two work on it?
Well, let's wrap up the whole...
well, I got something to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about my diet, which continues to go well. It almost scares me. I don't know how to go back, So what people don't know, I'm on this at your behest. I started lifting heavier weights. I got a lot to report on. I got to talk.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So doing more legs than I have in a long time. Heavy squats and deadlifts.
Okay,
right?
good. That's where the majority of your body's musculature is.
I understand. Fatigue because of that. So on the days when I do that, so I'm sort of dividing it up sometimes. Some I'll do the deads on one day and the squats on another day and just back to back them.
Yeah.
Or I'll do it. My gym is in my garage, and so I'll just sometimes just split it during the day. But on those days, I'm more tired for sure. And remember, I'm not eating any carbohydrates. Any carbohydrates.
Literally any?
I get a little bit of almond butter.
I was going to say, what about green vegetables and things? Like those have a small amount of...
Occasionally, I'm getting that. Okay, but
for the most part, you're getting a marginal amount.
There's no way I'm getting 50 grams.
Negligible
amount, maybe 30, maybe 25. And but I do chip on stuff that moves me in that direction, like cheese, right? So yeah. I'll start going with cheese, and guess what? My progress stalls when I do that, which
People
is crazy.
People have found that dairy, even though it's carb free, can stall ketogenic diets.
I was doing much better without the dairy, much better. But I love cheese, and I'll just go back to it once in a while. And I'm eating plenty, adequate green. I eat spinach, I eat asparagus, I eat leafy vegetable, that kind of thing, broccoli. But I'm not eating it regularly. And so yesterday, I was very strong. I don't know if I'm losing weight, but I don't weigh myself.
Okay.
But I can tell my pants are fitting differently. But I'm stronger than ever. And now I'm starting to hurt again. Like I feel like I've gone too far with the heavy. So I think I've been doing it too frequently. That's my bet.
Yeah.
Because I got enthusiastic with it, like everything I do, and I think I'm doing it like even the split legs I'll do twice a week instead of once a week. That may be a little bit much for me.
Well, it isn't if the volume is low enough.
Volume of lifts?
Yeah.
How many sets?
I mean, if you're doing 20 sets, yeah, that's
I'm doing 15.
Yeah, that's not something
14.
You're doing numerous times a week. If you're doing high frequency, the volume has to go down.
But I can't. I'm not doing very heavy. I'm doing heavy.
Doesn't matter. It's the volume of overall training.
Okay. That's what I thought. You're confirming what I thought.
Frequency, volume, and intensity
Yeah.
all work together. And when one
for me,
goes
frequency
up,
and volume for sure.
when one goes up,
Yeah.
the other has to go down.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
You know?
So there's that. On the diet side,
Yeah.
Everyone on Twitter is scared to death I'm going to have a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah, but you're not.
Well, let me just. Vinny and I. Well, Vinny's doing a documentary on fat. So when that comes out, we'll show you the science. We're going to talk to. He's going to talk to experts from all over the world on why the fat story is so distorted and how to do it properly. Okay.
Yeah.
I can tell our listeners that I had a cholesterol reading last week, a cholesterol blood profile. It was the best. Not that it's been the best I've ever had in my life. My HDL was higher than it's ever been. I've been trying to get my HDL up my entire life. It went up. My LDL was pegged at 90. My triglycerides, which have always been up, 75.
Are you serious?
That's insane. That's insane. My triglycerides at least should have been modest.
Right.
They were at the very pegged at the lowest end of the normal spectrum. And that was, by the way, the day before, ate half pound of bacon.
Well, I wonder. I've always known. Literally known that dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with your.
Well,
cholesterol.
not nothing because.
But wait. I'm starting to think it's actually beneficial.
Well, the HDL for sure.
Yeah.
I can tell you for sure. But let me. But here's the problem. There's all this data about people dying of multiple causes ingesting too many animal proteins. Right. And so I don't know what that is yet.
I know what it is.
What is it?
It's that the studies are too incomplete. It's like, oh yeah, they eat a lot of animal proteins. There's no knowledge of whether they smoke, whether they eat those animal proteins with a bunch of bread, whether they eat those animal proteins with a bunch of fucking
so they
corn
might be
syrup.
eating a lot of everything, right? So let me tell you what I think it is.
Let's be honest. Typically, meat eaters are not you and I.
That's
meat
right.
eaters are having hamburgers.
You're certainly eating potato with it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you're eating hamburgers, right? So let me tell you what I think it is. I think it's this.
Yeah.
I think it's central obesity. What?
People don't know what you're pointing
Yeah, well,
to.
I'll just don't worry. I'll describe it. I know how to work a microphone.
I know.
You may not be aware, but I've been on microphone
Sorry,
before.
it's
He
making
knows
me-
how to work a microphone. He has no idea how to work a phone system, but he knows how to work a microphone.
So I'm pointing at my mid abdomen,
Yeah.
and Susan was looking at. I'll tell you a story in a second, but I just believe that if
Susan was looking at your cock.
no,
Okay,
she
go
wasn't.
ahead.
No, not this time. And so this, if you can get this down, this abdominal obesity, we
The
call
fupa
it.
area.
The central obesity, it's called. If you can get that
Around
down,
the belly button,
my
for
bet
those-
is that's orders of magnitude more important than anything else.
Yeah.
And so that, if you find an effective diet that eliminates this, and this has been that for me, now you're on to a healthy zone.
Healthier life.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think that's it. I really do, because we know this thing, I'm pointing again at my abdomen, is an inflammatory organ.
The panis.
Well, I don't have a panis, thank God, but it could become a panis.
Panis is a fupa, right?
Yes, fupa is...
I have that.
Fupa's...
You do not have a fupa. Susan has no fupa.
I am getting fat on his diet, though, because the refrigerator is full of bacon, and I love bacon, and I'm not on the all-protein. I eat a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
you can't do that.
So
I
she
know,
had
it's
on her
so hard not to eat
23andMe.
that bacon.
On her 23andMe, they told her that she's got this certain gene that's associated with elite muscle performance, elite athlete.
Well, no,
She
I
can eat
have
normally
played
for
the
3
planet.
days. It all goes back to
she
whatever.
just said, I can't help but eat all that bacon. That's fine.
I love
But then
bacon.
don't have bread later.
Of course.
That's the key.
I
That's,
don't eat that much, but it's
That's the wine.
It's no, but I'm saying
It's the wine, yeah.
It's the wine.
But hormonally, it throws it all off.
Yeah.
Then
I
you
know,
get in that weird
I know.
spot.
But I've
you
been
know?
eating a lot of bacon since I was a kid, and I was never fat.
All right, so let's just agree that I think that where the story is incomplete is you factor in limiting central fat distribution, you will have your answer. I really believe that. So we have Swole meats in front of you.
Yes.
I brought up some Swole meats.
Yes.
I spent the morning barbecuing in anticipation of you arriving.
Oh, yeah.
At the instruction of my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to tell me what I should eat here. Describe what's here and tell me what I should eat.
Everything but the crackers.
Well, obviously I don't even see crackers.
Yeah, why'd you put crackers
Drew
on?
looks
I
like-
did not.
Oh, that
Looks
was
like you
true
got
stuff.
some lean sirloin there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
this
you got
is really
some
good.
bacon.
Yep.
Looks like a chicken breast. Some type of chicken sausage. Is that a chicken sausage?
What is that sausage? We don't even know.
Bratwurst.
It's a bratwurst, so it's
Beautiful.
veal.
And
Got some vegetables.
Maybe
some
turkeys.
veggies.
Yeah, bratwurst. That's right.
Okay, so what do we do with that cheese? I'm not going to eat it.
Listen, I have no problem with dairy, but it's far too many people have.
gonna
I've
eat the
in,
cheese.
in podcasts I've heard, in interviews of people, in experts talking
Yeah.
about it. So many people hammer home that even if you stay within the same caloric kind of window.
Yeah.
something about dairy can stall a lot of people's.
That's me. That's me.
progress.
Okay, so there you go. But I do love cheeses, fancy, hard cheeses and stuff. So I will still eat them just because I like them. But I talked to Kate Shanahan. I think I told you the other day, and she was telling me I was probably out of ketosis because I was taking too many calories. And so, again, back to the
Probably out of ketosis, you're having too much protein.
Same thing, right? No. So I have two questions. Should I be aiming for ketosis again?
I think it's
or does it even matter?
Honestly, I think it's just a nice byproduct. I don't think it's something to seek.
Okay, because for me, when I'm in ketosis, I'm aware of it because I sleep less and I think clearer.
Well, then go for it.
But I don't really know how to keep myself in that zone. I don't know if it's really good for me to be.
You got to bring down your protein. And
okay,
you got to up your fats.
I think that's correct. That's what it feels like to me is necessary right now.
No,
so,
that's there's science about it.
No. But I think the point is, I'm aware that that's true.
Yeah.
And yet I'm having trouble finding enough fat, the right kind of fat, and keeping the calories down. And by calories, protein, because everything's protein right now.
Stop eating. Replace one of your meals.
I don't eat meals. I'm sort of snacking.
Okay, replace one of your snacks with a coconut cream smoothie, and you'll rectify all the problems. You'll get another 50 grams of fat, maybe more, and it'll
coconut cream. There's lots of different kinds of coconut creams out there. Some of them are highly sugared.
Coconut
fat. You mean
coconut milk can be fatty, can be sugary. Coconut water.
When I put coconut cream in my coffee, it tastes like I poured sugar into it.
Well, then it's not plain coconut cream. Look,
okay,
I'm gonna bring it up on.
I think you've got Susan. There's a coconut fat thing up in the closet. Can you get it?
Coconut cream is an isolation.
But our next guest is
coconut cream.
Oh, okay, all right, we'll wrap.
Coconut cream is an isolation.
We'll talk about it.
Mike and I are gonna do a podcast just talking, updating stuff. So we'll bring it back on.
But just real quick, coconut cream is an isolation of the fat from coconut, and it's a creamy, and it's like whole cream from dairy. Like heavy whipped cream, but made with coconut.
And have you tasted that lately?
Absolutely, I drink it all the time.
It doesn't taste sweet?
It does.
I got you the
It has no sugar. Who gives a shit if it tastes sweet?
That's what
How could it taste sweet and not be sugar? Your tongue will.
A lot of things in life do that.
No,
listen,
not like this.
Organic coconut cream, right there.
In a can, right? They're in cans. Yeah.
In a can. I can show you.
Do we have that now? And when you say smoothie, what do I do?
I open this with a can opener, pour it in. I take 1 scoop of collagen protein, which only has about 9 or 10 grams of protein, and it's chocolatey, and I mix it in, and it's.
Can I
use
use your chocolate protein stuff you gave me?
I maybe use a half a scoop because, like I said, you want to
get the calories down,
right?
Yeah.
No. You want to get the protein down. I mean,
that's calories. That's calories.
Yeah.
Because any calorie source other than fat.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
This can has 5 servings. That's 300 calories of 30 grams of fat and total sugars less than 1 gram.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
So text me that can.
All right.
Text to me.
The coconut's going to save your.
And then again, I want to know a smoothie like I put ice, coconut cream, and collagen.
And a
if I don't have collagen, is there anything else?
I like collagen for ketogenic purposes, but no, I mean any protein should work. Just try to stay away from like a whey isolate because that can be insulinogenic, even though it's absent of carbs.
By the way, on the dairy front, before I finish, I feel like again experimenting a little bit. Like yogurt doesn't do the same thing to me that cheese does.
Maybe the probiotics have something to do with it. I don't know.
I take lots of probiotics.
Yeah. I don't know.
Weird.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Maybe I haven't experimented enough. So, okay.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. It is the Swole Patrol podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Mike Catherwood. And Dr. Drew is at Dr. Drew, of course. Join the email list today. Send your questions. drdrew.com/contact. And put Swole at the top of the email so we can get your comments. And this will get you a weekly email reminder with a link to this show and all the great shows that Dr. Drew and I do and all the shows that Dr. Drew does by himself and, of course, with Adam Carolla, the great Ace Man. Please tell a friend and subscribe on iTunes. Don't forget to rate us 5 stars. And on Podbean or Google Play. All 3 help us out. We also are on YouTube/Dr. Drew and hope you can give us all your comments, even if you're a troll and you want to destroy our feelings and our emotions. Support our sponsors and the show. Click on the banners on drdrew.com for the links for special discounts for the products Dr. Drew and I endorse 100%. Send questions and comments to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Swole Patrol Podcast, or on Twitter at Swole Patrol Pod. And be good. Be swole. Hashtag Swole Patrol.